some Masters players, y'all are not going to like me saying this, but it's more about time invested into the game when it comes to comparing those 3 ranks than actual skill. All right, let's jump right into this thing. When we're not doing any special intro, none of that stuff. We're just gonna jump right into the patch 1.14 notes for Legends of Runeterra. Also, I don't have my webcam on because I'm currently living like a hermit, so y'all are just gonna have to deal with that. You don't get to see my face, not this time. Although most of my videos have been faceless. The past several videos. Anyway, that's not the point. Let's just jump into it. Okay, patch 1.14 brings within an all-new experimental lab the debut of Friend Spectate and a hefty set of balance changes, headlined by updates to 7 champions. We've also got some metagame data to share. That has been long anticipated, so let's see what we got. First off, Metagame Snapshot. We'd like to start periodically sharing some of the metagame data we use to inform our balance updates over time, with a few key goals in doing so. Provide more visibility on the overall metagame framework with which we decide on balance changes. Highlight the variety of competitive strategies available to explore at any given time, assuming we're doing our jobs right. And share some cool deck ideas. Spoiler, there are no cool deck ideas on this one. But this is the first one, so it's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Anyway. While we're excited to share this data, there are definitely some presentation and digestibility challenges. Our internal tools output isn't pretty by default, so we'll try to set all the expectations we can. What you see below isn't necessarily a final format, and we may vary what exactly we present or focus on over time. For now, we're looking to share this kind of data about once a month, though we may experiment. Similarly, we're trying this out as a part of the patch notes, but aren't necessarily set on that. Let us know what you think. All right, that sounds good. I don't want this data every 2 weeks, personally. Like once a month is fine. All right, various things to keep in mind. Snapshot data looks at decks used in Platinum, Diamond, and Masters across all 4 of LOR's regional shards. That makes sense because they have said many times before that the data they look at is the games they look at are all Platinum rank and higher, as opposed to a third-party website like Mobalytics where they do Masters games and then they do below Masters. Those are the two. So, but Mobalytics is good as far as what to look for in Masters. If you just only want games played in Masters and what the meta is like there and only there, that'll influence. You want that to dictate your decision on what deck you're going to play to climb. All right, anyway, snapshot data includes only the most played meta decks, essentially a pile of largely similar decks with some variations, exclusive of the scattered smaller population of decks that don't fit significantly popular patterns. Generally, these fluctuate at around 40% of total decks. So, the scattered smaller population of decks that don't fit, that aren't meta, basically, there's 40% of those total decks? Even in Platinum, Diamond, and Masters? I find that hard to believe. Anytime I queue up Rank Ladder, the vast majority of decks I run into are meta decks, especially once you get to Platinum and higher. That's weird. 40% seems really high, honestly. In my experience, it feels like maybe 20% at best. Maybe 30%, maybe. But I think even for me, 30%, 3 out of my 10 games, I'm playing against decks that aren't meta. I guess maybe that's the case if it's like considered off meta. You have to consider that too. Like there's off meta decks there, and then there's just straight up brews. So thinking about it, 40% might be right. If we're considering off meta decks, then 40% might be correct. It's not just brews, because nobody brews in LOR. Not in ranked anyway. The brewing kind of stops once you hit gold and platinum. But anyway, this means the play rates below should be read as among meta decks, while the win rates are inclusive of all decks. The general bar for meta decks is 3% plus play rate or 50% or more win rate. For now, we're not planning to go too deeply into all the minute implications of the data in each snapshot. At a high level, 55% win rate and 15% plus play rate are our normal benchmarks for corrective balance. But we obviously do a lot of work outside those numbers as well. Here's how to read the deck summaries below. Regions, champions, and then most distinct unifying card on average. And then there'll be deck codes that represent one of the most common examples of each meta deck. For this initial metagame snapshot, we've actually got two. First, we have a snapshot of the metagame over the week prior to patch 1.13, where we adjusted Lee Sin and Make It Rain. So this was before Lee Sin and Make It Rain got nerfed. That's the first snapshot. The second is we've got a special shortened snapshot looking at the metagame since the KDA card started to hit the stage. It's also an example of the latest data, roughly a week old, you can expect to see in these snapshots, as that's right around when we have to lock patch notes for publication. Okay. So the second snapshot is post KDA. Not just post Lee, but post KDA. Alright, so I did look at these briefly. There are no surprises here, actually. And these have been the deck I've pretty much run into every single one of these decks at least once the past several weeks. Granted, I haven't played that much, but yeah, there's no like spicy tech that's any different. These are either decks that are being played currently, or we've seen all these decks before. So, and the same is true even post KDA. Nothing like insane has come up. Like the only new deck is like not even new, Spooky Karma. That's been a deck we've seen before. It's just got revamped. That's all. So yeah, I just want to give some of my thoughts regarding the meta snapshot, and then we'll jump into the cards. So we can now literally net deck from patch notes now, which I can't say I'm a fan of, only because I personally like to brew my own decks when it comes to card games. But I realize I'm part of the minority in the LOR community anyway when it comes to that. The vast majority of players, I've said this before, they net deck because they only care about winning games and climbing ladder, which is fine. That's how they get their enjoyment from the game, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm just personally not a fan because this reinforces net decking, which is already prevalent, and people already do that from other websites like Mobilytics just fine. But I don't think you can post win rates and play rates without posting a deck code, since deck codes are something that the vast majority of the community will ask for whenever they see a deck with a posted win rate anywhere. So even though I'm personally not a fan of deck codes being in the patch notes, it wouldn't make sense if they weren't, if they're going to do a meta snapshot anyway. So you either post all of this data or you just post none of it. Those are the only two ways that make sense. So this is going to be the thing going forward. I do have another concern, but it's kind of more related to a general metagame issue when it comes to seeing this data. I'm not going to like parse through every single one of these, partly because I have already, but for the purpose of the video, I don't want to parse through every single one again. But if you look at this list, there isn't a single deck that's posting a win rate that's 56% or higher. And the majority of these are 52% or less, which I know Riot wants to target 55% win rate. They're fine with that. And 15% usage. They're fine with that. That's considered healthy for them, I assume. But with that being the case, especially with most of these not most, but a majority of these being 52% win rate or under that, that makes the ladder grind extremely brutal in Runeterra. Because keep in mind, these win rates are based on platinum rank and higher. And starting in platinum, you need to post higher than a 50% win rate to even climb ladder. So personally, I think that's why only a few hundred people are even in Masters right now in any given shard. The LOR metas have kind of settled into this 50 to 55% win rate for all ranked decks for a while now. You could argue that Riot counting platinum and diamond games brings down that win rate since they are quote unquote less skilled. But if you've been paying attention to Mobalytics data that only counts master rank games for the past few months, the win rates haven't been much higher. Only a few decks barely get above 55% win rate in any given meta. And there is a skill gap. Let me be clear. There is a skill gap between Masters players and those in Platinum and Diamond. But it's not as big as people like to think. Some Masters players, y'all are not going to like me saying this, but it's more about time invested into the game when it comes to comparing those three ranks than actual skill. I know people like they're gonna go in the comment section of this video and tell me, oh, I'm just wrong, but I've played too many card games for that to like not be the case. It's never not been the case, and LOR has proven that, especially with the way their ladder system is set up. Like it is time spent. That is the most important quote unquote skill to have. You literally can't gain skill without time. So whoever's at the top is the biggest reason why is because they play the game the most, not because they have this inherent talent or inherent skill that other people don't have. Like this is wrong to if you think that. But yeah. Anyway, I do think people would be more incentivized to grind ladder if we could somehow get decks back into the 55 to 60% win rate range like we had back in open beta, and even during parts of the Rising Tides meta. Since honestly, I feel like Masters at this point is basically just streamers and any content creators that put significant time into playing the game. Like nobody else is hitting Masters, not without putting significant time anyway. Like if you're not a streamer or a content creator, you definitely are putting hours in to hit Masters at this point, especially with these win rates. You have to play a lot of games. Just period. It's much more of a grind than other card games that, well, at least the card game I came from. Sometimes it's felt like more of a grind than Hearthstone, like old school Hearthstone, before they made the change to their ladder format, because their ladder format now is like, it's easier, it's less of a grind now. But I don't know. Anyway, there's still some good things about the ladder system in Runeterra. It's not all bad, but it's definitely a lot grindier than it used to be, with the win rates going down from what they were before across all decks. So compared to open beta. Okay, card changes. We're finally here. So as we mentioned last patch 1.14 is one of the larger mid-expansion balance updates you can expect to be the norm going forward, and these changes are the last ones we have planned before the first seasonal tournament in December. This patch focuses mostly on improvements to several foundation set champions, small buffs both direct and indirect to call the mountain champions that need some help, and adjustments to high cost followers across regions. So let's start off with the first champion. Lucian is level 2, is getting buffed. It's a very small buff. It can now trigger the same round as leveling up. So this change and the similar one to Jinx below, spoilers, are intended to better align their level 2 effects with the way those of newer champions like Sejuani and Soraka function. There is some challenge here due to their current state of balance, but we feel that champion consistency in this area warrants a change. We're releasing these changes as buffs since the new functionality didn't feel significant enough in testing to warrant compensatory nerfs, but we'll be carefully monitoring their impact to understand whether further changes are needed. This is not the buff I was looking for. This is just a quality of life change, like I stated, and what was alluded to earlier in the notes. I'm glad. There have definitely been times where I played decks focused on leveling Lucian up, and the 2% of the time I did actually flip him. I had situations where I wished his ability would trigger on the same turn he leveled, but he is still ridiculously hard to level up in the first place, even if you have Sona in play sometimes. I've joked that he's nothing but a glorified Academy prodigy from PNZ, and he will continue to be just that, even though his play rate might go up from this change. Okay, Shyvana. Shyvana's power is increasing by 1, so she'll be a 4/4 at level 1 instead of a 3/4. She'll be a 5/5 at level 2 instead of a 4/5. Shyvana's designed around attacking, but her stat line too often kept her from being able to profitably do just that. I called this buff, but a lot of people called this buff. Some wanted a health buff, but Shyvana's designed around attacking, and her only being a bull Elnuck when she attacked was pretty weak. And this also means she'll level up faster, so this is a good change. Maybe it's enough to put Dragon decks over the top to where they're finally viable. They've been at the bottom of tier 3 for a while. Vladimir. All right, this is quite a bit. So Vladimir, old text reads, attack for each attacking ally other than Vladimir, deal 1 to it and deal 1 to the enemy nexus. The new text will say, for each attacking ally on my right, deal 1 to it and 1 to the enemy nexus. And his level up requirement has gone down to having 6 allies survive damage to only needing 5 allies to survive damage. Vladimir level 2 is getting the same treatment. It will only be units to the right of him that will be dealt damage. He keeps his drain ability that he got from a previous buff before. He might finally be good now. Maybe. I'm glad they lowered his level up requirement. Every time I try Vlad, getting 6 units to survive damage is always a lot, and he pretty much never levels up by round 5 without a ridiculously good start. The other change where he only damages units to the right of him is actually quite good, because now you get more control over who gets damaged during a Vlad attack and who doesn't. So now positioning is going to matter a bit more with Vlad. I think this is a very elegant buff, just like the last buff they gave to Vlad's level 2. But let's just say I am cautiously optimistic. Okay, Trundle. His health is being reduced from 6 to 5 at level 1 and 7 to 6 at level 2. The Ice Pillar, health reduced from 8 to 6. Okay, Trundle was too effective as a stat stick, helping him act as a stall tool, doubling as a win con. We love that Trundle has opened up new kinds of ramp decks since Call of the Mountain. So we want to make adjustments that preserve his ability to do that while opening him up to a bit more counterplay and softening his prowess as a blocker. In addition to a health nerf to Trundle himself, we're also adjusting Ice Pillar, which had too much impact given its free cost, leveling up Trundle, giving enemies vulnerable, and giving players a free action, providing too much of an advantage. Similarly to Trundle, we want to reduce the overall amount of stalling it provides and give opponents more potential for counterplay to its round start effect. So it was revealed on the official Discord for LOR that a Trundle nerf was coming a few weeks back. I do think this is a bit of an over nerf, but this tends to be the balanced team style when it comes to buffing and nerfing champions in particular. You put in the buff or nerf that you have in mind, and if you overshoot, then you can always dial it back the other way. I think Trundle should have been changed to a 5/5. I wasn't expecting an Ice Pillar nerf either, but I'm actually happy about the Ice Pillar nerf. It did way too much for something that's effectively free, and it took forever to deal with if you wanted to commit resources to it. I didn't think Trundle was OP necessarily, but he wasn't exactly balanced either, since when he was played, Trundle would stay on the board for the rest of the game against most decks. I don't think this makes him unplayable now, but it's hard for me to say he's still good now either. I think he's just okay at this point. Ezreal is level 1. Level requirement is going from targeting 10 enemies this game to only needing to target 6 enemies during the game to level up. His level 2, it's going from creating a fleeting mystic shot in hand and dealing 2 to the enemy nexus every time you cast a spell to still getting the mystic shot when you hit the nexus. But when you cast a spell, you only deal 1 damage to the enemy nexus. But if that spell targeted an enemy, you will still deal 2 damage to the enemy nexus. So we want to take an alternative but hopefully healthier direction for Ezreal. An easier level up condition in return for more conditional output for Ezreal at level 2. We also want to remove much of his current burst speed potential to open up more possibilities for counterplay. We're leaving some of that potential along with an easier level up so that he can still serve current decks, while providing a new incentive to continue targeting opposing units, giving players the option to play a bit more of a control game plan with a combo finish. So this change was also hinted at in Discord a few weeks back. Ben Rubin said they had a spicy change for Ezreal coming up. So I knew his level requirement getting easier was a possibility, but I didn't think they would knock it all the way down to 6. And I don't think they've done enough to the level 2 to balance out the cheaper requirement to get there. I want to be wrong on this, but I think Ezreal is going to be pretty dangerous again. Not quite on the same level he was before, but this change definitely puts him back in contention for tier 1 deck. It'd actually be nice to see Frostbite Ezreal come back though, instead of the same old Billswater or Noxus or Karma Ezreal decks that we've seen in the past over and over. But Frostbite Ezreal, it's one of those decks that's good, but it's been pretty pointless since it's usually been a worse version of another Ezreal deck that just does what it does except better. All right, Jinx, which was alluded to earlier, can also now trigger the same round as leveling up. So for those that skip to this, you want to check the Lucian contents above for the full story, since he got buffed in a similar way, pretty much almost the exact same way. But there is an additional note for Jinx. If you play Jinx with an empty hand and she levels up, she still will not create the Super Mega Death Rocket right away. So you'll need to empty your hand again during that same turn in some way. So I think the most common scenario for that is going to be when you rummage in discard aggro. I mean, you're going to run rummage in any Jinx deck anyway, but that'll be the most common scenario where you'll flip Jinx and make a rocket in the same round that you flip her. So I do have some additional notes here on Jinx. Some other things I wanted to say. I do want to say I am glad about this change. Probably a little more glad than I am about the Lucian change. I wish they did more for Lucian, just like I mentioned earlier. But there were definitely times where like I wish Jinx would make a rocket on the same turn she flipped. So I think it's a good change. I do still think discard aggro is overrated, and I'm being really nice when I say that. Jinx basically carries the archetype, which is fine, but I think she carries it a little too hard. And your win rate is way lower when you don't see a Jinx, in my experience playing the deck. So regardless, this is a buff to discard aggro. I just don't think it's nearly as good as other people think. And I have played quite a bit of discard aggro in my overall time playing LOR. Taric. Oh boy, Taric. Power is going up by 1, so level 1's a 3/4, and level 2 is a 4/5 now. Taric could use better combat stats to enable him to both attack more cleanly and contribute more on defensive rounds. This buff is huge. I was hoping for this change. I didn't think they would actually do it, but I was low key hoping for this change. I've been testing Taric for a little bit the past few weeks, and his 2 power has just felt anemic, even with him gaining tough when he attacks. But this is a good change, and it might finally make him viable. But I do still think his level requirement needs to be lowered slightly. Even in a dedicated support deck, he's nearly impossible to level up. And he usually forces you to play him as your first card during a given turn if you want any chance to do so, since he needs to be in play and see you support and target your other units. His level 2 is very strong, but it's not active all the time. And Hush is still getting played, so I don't see the big deal in lowering it down to needing to see 6 allies instead of 7. All right, now we're finally moving on to the followers and spells. First off, we have Tiana, who is going up to an 8/8. Tiana should be a bigger trump to endgame followers from other regions. This change should give Demacia decks access to more finishing power and allow Tiana to more consistently set up devastating rally attacks. So basically, Tiana has gone from nearly unkillable without hard removal to actually unkillable without hard removal. I don't think she needed a buff. She was already one of the scariest finishers that Demacia has, but Demacia has needed a lot of help for a while, since they only ever have one deck that's viable at any given point since the end of Rising Tides anyway, and that's Scouts. More surprising one is Wording Stones, at least for me. It's going back down to 3 health for the second time. We want to open up more counterplay to mana ramp strategies, given the additional powerful tools they've gained since Call of the Mountain. So we're reverting an old buff to Wording Stones in order to give opposing decks more opportunities to delay powerful endgame cards. So for you newer players, during the preview patch, Wording Stones was actually a 0/4. And then it got nerfed to a 0/3. And then it got buffed back to a 0/4. Although I believe, I can't remember if the mana cost also got reduced on Stones when it first got nerfed to 3 health. I believe that might have been the case. I'm almost positive. It was a long time ago. But yeah, it's been 3 health before. This is probably the worst nerf it's received, though, if that is actually true. If what I'm saying is correct, that it was 2 mana the last time it had 3 health. This is Wording Stones at its worst. So it is just funny to see this go back and forth between 3 health and 4 health. And the game hasn't even been around a year yet. So, well, actually, yes, if we're counting the preview patch, the game has been around a year. Anyway, anytime this is a 0/4, ramp dominates. Anytime it's a 0/3, ramp is like unplayable. Riot did say they got additional tools since they buffed this back to a 0/4. So this card's tough to kill early on at 4 health. Even if your opponent sometimes blocked with it. You know they usually didn't. So a lot of times Stones just felt pointless to deal with. You just let your opponent have the extra mana, since it costs even more to actually remove it. Especially since it's not an actual threat. So But I'm hoping this change stays. I don't want it to go back to 4 health. I'm kind of tired of it being at 4 health. I want it to just stay at 3 health. If we need to buff it, just, I don't know, reduce the mana costs. Introduce more ramp at different mana points. I don't know. Make it worth actually playing ramp on round 2. It's still not worth it to play ramp on round 2. But hopefully we'll get a card that facilitates that in the future. Alright, Fuzzy Caretaker. Going from a 4-cost 4/3 to a 3-cost 3... Oh no, 4-cost 3/3 to a 3-cost 3/2. Support-based Ionia decks could use more effective options, and Fuzzy Caretaker was a bit too expensive to effectively fit the playstyle of low-to-the-ground support decks. So, if the support deck that I think is going to come up out of this patch ends up actually being viable, I don't like this buff. If Lulu Taric is going to be a thing, which is the deck I've been testing Taric in, Targon and Ionia already have a ton of other support units to play for 3 mana, and it kind of sucks that Lulu decks are losing a support unit at the 4 mana slot. I could be wrong in the sense that Caretaker on 3 is exactly what Lulu decks needed, and not cards like Trevor Snoozebottom or Mentor of the Stones, with the latter being a card I'd much rather play if I'm also running Taric. But we'll see. I'm definitely willing to try it. All right, Mina Swiftfoot. Going from a 6/5 to a 7/6 and gaining quick attack. So Mina's effectiveness hasn't lined up with her costs. Quick attack and additional stats should let her be a more effective game ender after hitting the board. And I totally agree with Riot's reasoning on buffing Mina here. I do think her effect was good enough for 9 mana, especially since you got a body with it. But as a 6/5 with no other abilities afterwards, she can sometimes feel underwhelming. Although I do think Mina has been underrated overall. Quick attack is the change I'm most excited about, but I'm not sure that even these buffs will be enough to change most players' opinions on Mina. Most players have a pretty low opinion on Mina Swiftfoot. So I think she'll probably continue to be criminally underplayed. Funsmith going down to 4 mana and losing 1 power, becoming a 1/3. So Funsmith has never been able to find a home given its cost and relative fragility, so we're bringing it down the curve to make it a more enticing and flexible option. This is fine. I've always felt Funsmith should have costed 4 mana this whole time. It would have been nice if it didn't have to trade a stat point to get there, but that's how Riot balancing usually works in LOR, so I'm not surprised. A card usually doesn't get somewhere without some type of trade-off. Black Spear will now deal 4 damage instead of 3 damage. We'd like to strengthen removal options for synergy-based Shadow Owl's decks, especially in light of the power of new burst speed protection spells from the last 2 expansions. Oh, Riot. Oh, goodness. Oh, man. I've already said my feelings. I'm going to say them again. I'm going to say them again how I feel about Spell Shield. But, you know, it's fine. It's fine. That's just funny to me. Given the age of Spell Shield that has come upon us. But, yeah, I didn't see this coming. I'm happy about this change. But I think it would have been even better if this got reverted back to 2 mana instead of increasing its damage. Especially since, like I said, removal is much worse now that we have Spell Shield in the game constantly looming over us. But 4 damage, all things being said, 4 damage removal's nearly non-existent as it is, so I will take a Ravenous Flock for 3 mana in a region that makes its requirement to play it relatively easy. Riptide Rex. Oh, I know people are singing Happy Day for this one. His power is going down from 7 to 6, and now he will only fire 6 cannons instead of 7. The sheer volume of cannon barrages laid down by Riptide Rex has made him too consistent at wiping boards. finishing games with his high power and ultimately preventing counterplay, while also posing a long-term issue with our board's 9-spell ability limit. These changes aim to address all of those issues while leaving Rex's core play pattern intact. So, I know people are happy about this one. I don't hate this change either. I especially like that they reduced the cannons, but only by 1, since sometimes it did suck that occasionally you couldn't even get your own spell in to respond to what Rex was doing, depending on what was going on at the time. So, granted, no spell would do much to stop or mitigate what Rex was doing anyway, but it still would be nice to have that option more often. But yeah, people have wanted this card nerfed to the point where it's basically deleted from the game. And I'm glad Riot didn't do that. I think it's a good change. Eclipse Dragon. I'm pretty excited about this one. It's going from 5 health to 7. Eclipse Dragon's stats were underwhelming given its lack of immediate game impact, and we liked it to be a more generally effective option for both big dragons and Daybreak decks. So, I would say this is the change I'm most excited about. I've played Eclipse Dragon, and 5 health just felt awful anytime I was considering playing this card for 7 mana. I basically expected this to get removed as soon as I played it, and usually it did. I got value out of it, but it'd be nice if, you know, a 7 mana unit would stick to the board for a bit, especially since half the time you wouldn't get immediate value out of it. The only time you would is if you use the Nightfall portion of it. But yeah, I've always thought Eclipse Dragon would end up being a mainstay in Dragon decks. This buff is going to cement that, in my opinion. All right, those are all the card changes. We'll quickly go over the remaining changes. I'll read some of these, actually. So there's a new lab, Hexperimentation 101. With the right combination of variables, anything can happen. Perform one of 4 experiments by crafting a deck with unique constraints, or choose one of Heimer's pre-made decks to take into battle. If your deck meets one of the following criteria, you'll gain the paired special ability. There's all even. If all cards in your deck have an even mana cost, you gain start of round, grant allies +1/+0. All odd. If all cards in your deck have an odd mana cost, you gain start of round, grant allies +0/+1. If you have no followers in your deck, then you gain, when you cast your second spell each round, create a follower in hand that costs less than or equal to your max mana. Keep in mind, you can still have champions in your deck, you just can't have followers. If your deck is all common cards, then from round 7 onwards, you create a leveled up champion in hand at the start of every round. So these are very cool. Some of these might be a hint towards upcoming formats or even themes of upcoming sets, particularly the cards based around even and odd mana costs. So we might see that in the future. Who knows? Gauntlet update. Standard best of 3. In preparation for the first seasonal tournament in December, we're running the next 2 weeks of gauntlets as standard best of 3. So players have a chance to experience the new game flow before the tournament. For now, this is a temporary change only for this patch, but let us know what you think. Since each match requires more than 1 game to complete, we've reduced the number of wins needed per run down to 4 and increased the XP rewards appropriately. Each match will play through the pick and ban lobby, with the additional restriction that a winning deck cannot be replayed in that match. So for patch 1.13 only, gauntlets will use standard best of 3 rules. Don't they mean 1.14, right? Please. Typo? Maybe? Possibly? Typo? I think it's a typo. Anyway. Required wins reduced to 4, and XP rewards adjust appropriately. Winning decks cannot be played again during the same match. I'm a big fan of this change. I think they should do this during the final few weeks of every season going forward, so we get used to the tournament format and we can better prepare for it. That way we don't have to do community tournaments all the time to prepare for it. And sometimes those community tournaments aren't the exact same format. They're similar, but they're not always exact. All right, Friend Spectate. This patch, we're making our initial implementation of Friend Spectate, which will allow you to jump in and watch your friends' games with all the usual in-game functionality like Oracle's Eye, card details, and, most importantly of all, petting their guardian. Please note this feature is coming in pretty early, so we're still squashing bugs and have further updates planned. For example, next patch we intend to add a disable spectate option, which is why for now, we're restricting spectate to only be available for friend challenge versus player in normals versus AI and expeditions. Friend spectate added to the social panel. Click on your friends to spectate their matches in friend challenge versus another player in normals versus AI or expeditions. Interesting how you can't friend spectate in ranked. I think that should be added eventually. If they weren't planning on adding it, I think it should be added. Well, I don't know. Maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe it's not good for this game. I come from Eternal and they had it in ranked. You could friend spectate ranked games. But now that I think about it, like maybe it's a bad idea. With all the there's stream sniping that goes on, there's other types of sniping that goes on. So maybe it's not a good idea to include it for ranked. So I don't know. It would just be to prevent any type of sniping of any kind, even if it's not stream sniping. It doesn't have to be stream sniping. It could just be any sniping of any kind. It's probably better to just not have ranked, not be able to watch ranked games. So this is still going to help tournaments though. Even in this early implementation. And I've said that before in previous videos. Community tournament organizers, this is huge for you guys. Since now you don't have to use third-party services like Discord to spectate games, even though Discord is good, but it's better to have an in-client spectate option if you're doing tournaments for LOR. Expeditions, don't really care about. All I'll say is Dragon's Descent is getting touched. It is getting touched, but they're bringing it in for a bit because dragons are dominant in expeditions and they're buffing some other archetypes. But yeah, last stuff is the miscellaneous. Won't really cover the bug fixes, but miscellaneous, they're doing various updates to the leaderboard, including most used deck code, player icons, and visual polish. Imported decks are now immediately nameable. Rewarded cards are now inspectable during reward ceremonies. So you can see what cards do in the reward section. I think. I might be wrong. In the collection and the store, the details panel for cosmetic items can now be closed by tapping outside of it. So all quality of life stuff. Big fan. Big fan. To some of you, this is going to sound weird, but not being able to name my decks immediately after importing them from somewhere else was secretly a pet peeve of mine. So the imported decks being immediately nameable is the thing I'm most excited about. And of course, the updates to the leaderboard. I like that too. I think it's good that they're adding that information. That's it. If you guys made it to the end of the video, thank you so much for the support. I know it was long. If you enjoyed the video, let me know by hitting the like button just below the video. And leave a comment if you're excited about any of these changes. Also, make sure to subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to click the notification bell below if you don't want to miss future videos. Check out all the other social media places I hang out at as well. There are links to my Twitch stream, Twitter, and community Discord all in the video description below. Thanks again for taking time in your day to watch this, and I will see you all soon. Take care.